Well, let me say thank you very much. It's great to be with you. I know the sun is hot out there, but I have to say thank you. And I want to say thanks to the Knights for the extra presence here today. I couldn't agree more than with Jana when she said this is an epic battle. And I agree wholeheartedly with Rob that this is the beginning, this may well be the beginning of a redefining of the relationship between the federal government and its citizens. Now, I turned 60 this year, and I want you to know that I have the right now to say things like, when I was young, and I expect you to listen, because I will offer wise and sage insight. So when I was young, divorce was something discussed in hushed tones. Nobody had thought of the phrase starter wives or serial monogamy. Homosexuality, while we were aware of it, it was never the subject of polite discussion. Out-of-wedlock pregnancies happened, but oftentimes young ladies were whisked away to some aunt in another city or town, or the fella asked her to marry him, and that was kind of expected. Now, I'm not saying that was a great solution. However, it does tell you that there was a very different attitude to out-of-wedlock pregnancy just a generation ago. A survey of teachers in 1940 listed talking out of turn, chewing gum, running in the halls, and getting out of line as the top problems the public schools were facing. It wasn't a golden age. I mean, there was the threat of the atom bomb, there was racial segregation in the South, and there was high pressure to acquire material things and keep up with the Joneses, as we used to say. But the Catholic Church bore witness to a better way. They functioned a bit like the soul of the nation. They kept us praying for peace and pushing our leaders to work for peace, even as we stood against atheistic communism. The church wasn't segregated, and they pushed in its schools for integration, even in the South. That, of course, what it meant to be Catholic, was to be open to all people. The church functioned in some way kind of like the soul of the nation. And I never thought that I would be raising my children in a world in which divorce has become commonplace, in which 50% of children are born out of wedlock, in which intact families are becoming fewer and fewer, and the greatest indicator of criminal behavior is if a young man doesn't have a father in the home. Then again, I should say, I never expected I would see the collapse of Soviet-style communism in my lifetime. And I certainly didn't think that a key figure in its demise would be the Pope of Rome. And I never expected this country to command that Pope's church to violate its own teaching by trying to force its adoption agencies to release adoptive children to same-sex parents, or to force us into buying insurance for same-sex couples, and now to force our hospitals, universities, and schools, our media outlets, and our charitable organizations to participate in making contraception, abortifacient drugs, and sterilization more available and accessible. I never thought my government would command the Church of Mother Teresa to engage in activity that it regards as sinful and destructive of human flourishing. But that time is upon us. C.S. Lewis's novel, That Hideous Strength, talks about a time when there's no longer any elbow room for indecision, no longer any time to be neutral. Good gets better and better, evil gets worse and worse. We are at that point in America. There's no more elbow room anymore. The moral and spiritual issues have become very, very clear. Christ's people are diverging from the American people. We see kingdoms in conflict. And your presence here today is an indication that we have a conflict of kings. We have a conflict of governors. We have a conflict of rulers. And so my question to you is, are you willing to shake up the status quo at the price of peace? Are you willing to cause trouble? Are you willing to lay your convictions bare before your friends and your enemy with all the full force of your faith? America needs your witness to something beyond this world in order for it to recover its moral compass. This nation is wobbling, it's threatening to crash. It needs some kind of direction from a spiritual GPS, and that is the soul of the nation, which is the church, which is the people of God, which is you. Are you willing to take on that responsibility? We will, I think, win this round, but what we now see is that there's an elite core of individuals who think so little of religious liberty and so little of the Catholic Church's contribution to our social order that they actually think that Cardinal Dolan and the bishops would violate their consciences in order to conform and comply. We will not comply, we will not conform, and it's going to take you causing trouble in your families, in your churches, in your businesses, in all your relationships to make sure people understand that we are in a black and white situation. There's no longer any elbow room for indecision. The time for neutrality is past. This is the time for partisanship and deep commitment to the most fundamental right that America has to offer the world. And that is the right to worship freely, the right to exercise one's liberty in the public square and not just in your home. I think Nick is coming up to lay out some practical ways that we can take action here. But remember what you vowed to.